Good day, everyone. On behalf of Disruptive Focus, I would like to welcome you to today's session on moving your business into the Metaverse. I'm very delighted to introduce our guest speakers in the studio, Jawad Ashraf, CEO and co-founder of Virtua, and Asif Afzal, CEO of Disruptive Focus. How are you doing today?
Very well, thanks.
Very well, thank you for the intro.
And joining us from Sydney, Australia, is Carl Tillez, Strategic Advisor and founder of iAdvisory. How are you, Carl?
I'm doing well, thank you. Great to be here.
Okay, so let me start by introducing each guest speaker, starting with Jawad Ashraf. He's the CEO and co-founder of Virtua. He has been building and engaging with disruptive tech since his early 20s, with a mission to help businesses gain a competitive edge both as a developer and a programmer. Originally a software engineer, he worked on web applications and mobile apps. He has now created Virtua, the next big technological advancement in blockchain, NFTs, and ownership of digital assets. Next speaker is Asif Afzal. He is the CEO of Disruptive Focus. He's a seasoned translation and education expert who has over 25 years of experience in strategy and internal company training, focusing new systems and procedures towards driving growth. His expertise allows him to set up Disruptive Focus as an educational platform that allows a variety of immersive learning experiences. And last but not the least, Carl Tillez. He's the strategic advisor and founder of iAdvisory. He deals with top-tier clients in building the digital and data economy across the industry. He's engaged with governments, enterprises, global tech leaders, and startups, with a core focus on realizing the digital economy across APAC, EMEA, and US. Before we start, let me remind you that this is a 15-minute live session. There will be Q&A towards the end. If you have any questions, please type them into the comment section anytime during the presentation. In case you experience any technical issues, please check your internet connections and refresh your browsers. And now let's start with our first question. And this question is for Jawad. So tell us about the Metaverse and how do we access it?
Okay, well, the Metaverse is, I think before we talk about the Metaverse, we should say what it is. So a lot of people always ask that question. So I think basically the best way for the audience to understand what the Metaverse is, think about the internet. Now the internet is like a load of different websites, all which give you different experiences. And ultimately what happens is that when you browse the web, you're not thinking about you are going to a particular website and spending all your time on it. You're going to a connected set of websites which are all your favorites, which exist as part of your internet experience. Now think of that as a metaverse. The metaverse is going to be different places that you can go to, which are not just flat glass experiences like they are right now, except they're going to be 3D and they're going to be immersive. And that immersion is going to be on different devices over a period of time. It might be on a console, like there are metaverses, Fortnite potentially is a metaverse, and many have existed on the PC and different platforms. So you're going to be able to consume the metaverse on different devices, but predominantly it's a 3D space. Whether the 3D is VR, whether it's flat 3D on a desktop, whether it's on a mobile phone, you will enter that space and it's going to be much more realistic and interactive than you'd ever see with the internet. That's a metaverse. So with that in mind, what you've seen is different companies try to create their own metaverse. So if you look at Facebook, they're creating Meta, which is much more of a socially driven experience. And they bought the Oculus technology to do that. They're making the hardware and they're making the software to do that. But then you've got other companies that are also building metaverses, which are immersive experiences. And ultimately, what is the metaverse in blockchain? It basically is a place where now the assets in the metaverse, you can now own them and you can monetize them and you can have businesses in these 3D environments. Whereas in the existing sort of metaverse spaces, a metaverse is like a Call of Duty or it's World of Warcraft or it's Fortnite. People go, they socialize and they do things, but when you go into those ones, and even Meta, you don't actually own the assets. You don't own the environment, you don't own the land, you don't own the space. You can't really create your own discrete economy, which is offline, because what happens with a lot of metaverses, they flick the switch, the metaverse is gone. So when someone wants to find out about the metaverse, first understand that it's multiple spaces by multiple companies, all who are creating metaverses, and then think about how they're going to be used. In the future, metaverses is going to be able to traverse from one metaverse to another, to another, to another quite easily. Right now, you have to research, find out the one you have, and each one will have their own onboarding, their own sign up, their own ways to register. It's a bit like when you go to a website and you sign up for a particular service. But ultimately, right now with websites, you can jump around. With metaverse, you can't, but that is coming. There are multiple companies doing that. So when you come into the metaverse, every metaverse has different utility. So if you go into a metaverse, which is like Decentraland, you go there, you can build objects, you can have buildings, but you can't really do an awful lot. If you've got, and that's the case with most metaverses. Now, even with virtual, what we're doing is we're focusing on the fact that the focus on metaverses right now and people going into them is not just about buying land. Because if you look at the daily active users with a lot of the Web3 metaverses, they're actually quite low, much lower engagement and usage than most other metaverses. And that's because they're not focusing on experiences. If you look at the likes of Roblox, you look at the likes of platforms that allow you to create and encourage content and creators, those are the ones that get multiple engagement. So a metaverse that is going to be useful for a user to engage with needs to offer them the ability to potentially build a business, have land, but that's not all of it. It needs to be about doing things in it, engaging with it. You want 10 million people, 20 million people coming in and engaging in the metaverse and doing things in there, and landowners also being able to do more interesting stuff within it to monetize themselves. So looping back to your answer, that's what it is. You need to understand what a metaverse is, and then you need to be able to focus on how to onboard and be engaged in that metaverse. And right now it's very early days. It's like the Wild West. So opportunities are here, and there's a lot you can do in business right now.
Thank you so much, Jawad. That's really very insightful. And for the next question, it will be addressed to Asif. So Asif, what are the business opportunities in the metaverse?
Thank you, Stella. So a very relevant question. And for me, when it comes to doing business, the first thing I look at is finance. Financially, what's the opportunity? And I think that really then identifies and clarifies the opportunity, and therefore what activities can be created and done in order to create financial opportunity. So when I'm looking at business, I'm looking at financial opportunity. Now, in order to look at financial opportunity, what does the internet currently consist of? So research shows us that the market cap of internet-based companies in June 22 was in excess of $7.5 trillion. So $7.5 trillion, that's an extremely large amount of money in the metaverse. And looking at what the metaverse is, it's an extension of the internet. It's the next step for the internet. So what opportunities do the metaverse therefore present financially? And we know from a Citibank study recently that they identified the metaverse opportunity to be in the region of $8 to $13 trillion by 2030. So looking at that number there, that gives us an idea of the type of financial opportunity we have in the metaverse, and that's what we're talking about. So when we're talking about business opportunity, let's look at the numbers. There's a huge amount of potential in the metaverse. The next stage from there for me is, okay, well, if I'm looking at a business opportunity, I've identified that there's a market. Now, who's my target audience? And when it comes to the metaverse, you know, we have to identify the target audience, and we know very clearly that it is the Gen Zs. The Gen Zs have cumulatively spent more than $1 billion on digital items. So that gives us an idea of what they've already done without maturing into the mass market. So the opportunity, again, financially is huge. We've identified the market. What's the best way to connect with Gen Zs? Now, we know the best way to connect with our market now is not to actually try and bring our market to us, but go to where the market is. So where's the market? If we look at Gen Zs, what are they doing? What's their activity? Where do they spend the majority of their time? And again, we know now that they're spending their time in the metaverse. They're engaged in activities that are, whether it's gaming, whether it's education, they're on devices, they're within metaverse environments. So Roblox, for argument's sake, has 56 million users per day on its platform. And that gives us an idea of daily users on a metaverse environment. So in order to engage with this target audience, really we have to enter the metaverse. And that shows you financially what the opportunity is and who the audience is, and therefore what we should be doing to actually engage with this audience. In terms of use cases now, let's look at use cases of what's happened today. Okay, so the metaverse is there, it's developing, and it still has a long way to go, but in terms of its initial infrastructure, we can see that things have very, very much started, they're in progression, and our Gen Z audience are very much engaged with activity in the metaverse on a daily basis. So the opportunities that I'd talk about would be gaming. So we have the likes of Decentraland, Roblox, Sandbox. What do these platforms offer as metaverse environments? They offer creator economies. They offer individuals the ability to go on and develop products, games, and services within an environment where they're actually having the ability to independently create. So that space alone has created virtual assets, it's created NFTs, it's created a huge market. And that's a huge area of growth when it comes to business opportunities. One of the other areas that I like to look at, which I think is very keen, we've probably all had some sort of experience in it, is virtual workspaces. We've all been exposed to and had to work on WebEx and Zoom calls over the last couple of years, and that hasn't really stopped even post-corona. And therefore, you know, what do we do now to actually take that experience into an immersive environment? And that's what we're seeing a lot of. So there's hybrid and remote working environments that are coming up. There's virtual real estate, there's digital entertainment events that are happening, there's virtual advertising. The fashion and luxury brands have already started to enter the metaverse, and we've seen the monetizing of various opportunities there already, with Gucci selling a handbag for $4,000. We've seen Adidas launch products that have sold for up to $22 million in a few hours. So the opportunities, whether you're government, whether you're enterprise, whether you're fashion, there are huge opportunities for business to be involved in the metaverse, and that's really exciting for me, and I'm sure it is for many of us out there. I'm sure we can talk more about that, but I'll round up there, and would love to hear some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Asif. That's a lot of opportunities out there. So the last question goes to Carl. So Carl, how should brands, corporations, or SMEs be planning for the metaverse?
Yeah, look, great question. And I just want to echo, obviously, some of the comments that Jawad and Asif have made, because they're all relevant. I mean, we are living as a hybrid generation, I guess most of the global population today. And that hybrid generation has learned to live without the internet, because we were born without the internet. And now we're obviously unable to live without it. So if you start to look at that and you look at Gen Z, and I think Asif touched on some of the economic factors there. Gen Z and future generations are born into the internet. And what does that mean? Well, that means that brands and corporations, SMEs, have to start thinking about not only the future consumer, but also that future worker and that future decision maker that's going to be relevant, whether for partnerships, whether for certain services, and that sits across the spectrum. So we're not just talking corporates as in enterprise, you're also going to think about government here. So the relevance of the digital world will become a norm for corps and government in the medium and long term. Gen Z itself, if you sort of look at the numbers there specifically, over the next 10 years, expectations are that they'll probably earn around about $33 trillion worth of income. Majority of that will be spent online. And in a form factor that they may spend that online, I would argue that a big portion of that will probably land within the metaverse. So, you know, if you are an institutional player, or if you start to think about what's been happening today, you see brands such as JB Morgan, HSBC in the financial services sector already acquired digital property and digital land and seeking to start offering customer experiences within that environment. But then you've also got the F&B space, the food and beverage space, where you have, you know, obviously global names such as Red Bull and McDonald's, announce their plans for the metaverse. And if you start to think of the relevance of food and beverage, well, it's beyond just having obviously a physical access to what they're offering. Think of the way that they're engaging with their consumer. If you think of Red Bull, you start to think about content that they own, and you start to think about events and sponsorship of events that they are participating in, and some of those obviously, in the sports realm and others and unique environments around that. But there is a whole bunch of content that needs to be made available. When you start to think about those experiences, start to think about digital property, you got to think about accessibility. So when you make a decision, I think Jawad mentioned it earlier, to be present within the metaverse, well, what does that really mean? Presence is important from multiple factors. One is it could be a place where you not only showcase your brand, but also start offering and announce new services to a greater audience. Beyond that also is the literacy angle. How do you onboard and upskill your workforce? How do you start to encourage and bring together an ecosystem to help make decisions maybe around certain reviews, and it may relate to regulation. We're seeing obviously in Dubai the likes of the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority making some announcements to be present in the metaverse. That helps sort of streamline decision making and brings an ecosystem together to fast track some of those areas. And then obviously on the I guess the beyond literacy, start to think about universities. I mean, you may have kids at the moment studying abroad. There's no reason why academia can't be interlinked through a metaverse ecosystem. If I make decisions right now, and if I think of just in Dubai, we have multiple economic zones and they're free zones. And you start to look at the physical spread of those zones, whether it's Dubai Internet City or Media City or others, you can physically walk between them. Now, if you take that and you replicate that in a digital form factor, and that is the metaverse really, you start to think about, okay, how do I engage and fast track that engagement and be able to interlink across, those property establishments, but in a digital format. But then also, how do I interlink across global economic zones and start to bring the globe into it? So you're not limited by accessibility. And if I'm a brand or if I'm an SME, relevance and having some kind of presence where you're easily identified, but also having easy access to engagement, that's going to be huge. And then obviously we see the opportunity around the retail sector, and we're seeing some obviously movements around the fashion realm. But we're only scratching the surface of these opportunities there. On the sports sides and on the fan engagement side, I mean, there's massive potential. I'll sort of argue an example where, I follow the Premier League. I'm a Liverpool follower, but I'd love to sort of not only watch Liverpool in a standard format on TV, but maybe I could sit in a virtual stadium and sit there and also experience it with friends and family across the world. And rather than just watching it on my own through TV, I can actually be probably immersed in an environment which gives me that same look and feel or as possible in a virtual realm. And that drives a different type of experience. You can obviously acquire potential collectibles. There may be an NFT drop of a jersey, or for your favorite player may have scored a goal on that day, but because you're a member, you can use that maybe as an access pass for many other activities. We're seeing McLaren in the Formula One racing now start to offer their fans and experiences for fans through NFT drops of the car digital prints of their latest release cars. So there's different ways of engagement. Experience is really critical. Government's starting to look at this from a efficiency point of view, from offering almost like lobby experiences and first engagement experiences. So, like I said, we're only scratching the surface. You've got to think, 5 to 10 years down the track. You can't think just today. And, if you think about what I've just said there, I think there is a multitude of reasons why, a brand and corporation is start thinking about the metaverse proactively.
There's a lot of opportunities here right now.
Yes, thank you so much, Carl. Yes. So now let's check if there are any questions submitted in the comment section from the audience. And meanwhile, we're doing that, I have a question for the three of you. What are the considerations for choosing a metaverse platform, and what should companies look for?
Well, I think let's jump into that one first because everyone wants to talk. But what you've seen is that right now companies are getting really excited and they're talking about, I want to be in the metaverse, but they have no idea what that means. Or they're building a virtual space and just thinking, field of dreams, I'm going to build it and they will come. Or they want to try to integrate it deeply into their CRM systems and make it an extension of the website. So I think companies need to sit, pause, take a breath, and engage with people who are building and figure out what is possible today and where they're going, and then build their experiences against that roadmap. That will take them on a journey, because the progression of the metaverse will be a journey, just like it was for mobile or for web. So that's my 2 cents. I mean, Carl,
Yeah, look, I echo what you just said there, and I think what's really important is start to think about how you traverse within a metaverse. I mean, if I take some of the work that you guys are doing with Virtua and virtual commerce specifically, having that ability to go through a multi-chain environment and traverse from one to another, that's really important. I think at the end of the day, you've got to have that ubiquitous angle to the way that you engage. And so making decisions where it's not just I'm present, it's am I able to access and be a part of a wider community who is in my field. And I start to think about industry metaverses who are participating in a certain environment. And I think that's really the key. Like I said, you take the physical world experience and you start to replicate that in the digital world. It's really easy to sort of start to think about how that could apply.
And to that point, I mean, the metaverses that we've seen, the early metaverses, are very much like Lego. Now, if you're talking about fashion, which is like the number 2 thing right now in terms of NFTs and the crypto, you've seen a lot of rise in the fashion industry. You need to represent that in the metaverse in high fidelity. So high fidelity metaverses that can show assets in 3D are also very important as well. That fidelity is very important. That's why virtual commerce is focusing in on that. Because ultimately, if a brand wants to engage with their audience, their products need to also be showcased. If you want to showcase a McLaren car or an Aston Martin or a new jacket, you don't want to look at like a bunch of Lego. So that's sort of where a lot of the early metaverses have gone. So that's now an opportunity for brands to engage with them in the right way, to showcase their assets in the right way, but also to provide access to their audience so they can jump on from every access point. Because right now that's also missing. A metaverse will focus on Unreal or desktop or on Unity and not cater for the mobile user, or the other way around. So you've got to provide an easy way so it's just completely frictionless. And like you said, Carl, the tech doesn't matter. In crypto, there's a tendency for everyone to talk too much about technology. No one cares how an in-app purchase works. They just want it to work. So that's really what it needs to be for the user. It's about utility.
Yeah. Definitely. No, again, agree with both of you there. From our experience at Disruptive Focus, we are very much on the B2B space for Metaverse. And again, what we're realizing is exactly the same as what you've said, Jawad, there. It isn't about a metaverse for the sake of a metaverse. It's not a tick box exercise, which often
it is.
Government entities are trying to fulfill on an objective, and it doesn't work. If you're looking for advantages, if you're looking for a better user experience, if you're looking for efficiency, then a metaverse environment isn't always the answer to your problems. And that's the key here. So when we're speaking to our clients and we're speaking to government, we're very clear with what is achievable and what the metaverse offers in terms of an environment, in terms of the efficiencies in regards to what they're looking for. And in most cases, it's just another channel. At this point in time, it offers another channel of communication for your customers, for your audience, for your clients, and also internally it offers another channel. And I think that's the key here, that as it develops, we just need to ensure that people are aware of its utility, they know what the purpose is, and again, touching on a point that Cole mentioned in terms of industry planned zones, that's where the real value will come in as we start to build and develop metaverse environments that are focused on industry, focused on a utility, develop a community where people are able to benefit from different services within an environment, that's where the real value will come in, and that's what we're working on. So,
Yeah, well, that all makes sense. I mean, this is the thing, that it needs to stop
Yeah.
the rubber stamping exercise. And does it provide utility? Does it solve a problem? It's an age-old thing. Metaverse or no, you got to look at those things.
Yes. Thank you so much. Carl, any more insights?
I think we're all on the same page. I think utility is really the secret ingredient. It's got to have some specific value which adds value to you as an entity, but also specifically to the consumer. Ultimately, that's what drives consumer engagement and behavior. And I think, whatever industry you're in, across the board, there is an application that can be utilized through the metaverse to address a problem, and that problem needs to be identified. But ultimately, the future consumer gives you an idea of where they're going to be active, but then you also look at tech and infrastructure being ready now for the metaverse ecosystem to start building upon that. And I think you need to have that ability to have seamless ability to move between metaverses, and obviously not have that that friction and lag. And I think high fidelity is a big reason why this will be taken to another level. And I think that's where everyone's thinking. Gaming has taken it to a level. High fidelity / commerce will take it to a different level, and then you'll start to see the creative economy really in action, I think, at that point.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we have a question from our audience. Okay, the question goes, who will govern the metaverse, and what prevents someone from creating another car company in the metaverse without paying that car company for?
Well, no one really should govern the metaverse. It should be self-regulated. At least that's my opinion. Because otherwise, none of the Gen Zs will use it. It's literally,
Yes.
it's going to be as simple as that. They will not engage. We're just moving from one government style to another. There's going to be a level of self-regulation. And with self-regulation will come things like stopping fraud, doing KYC, but it will be much more decentralized. If you have decentralized KYC and someone creates a brand and it's a rip, I assume what they're trying to say is, can they just rip off a car brand and put it in the metaverse? Well, if you're going to do that in the metaverse needs to be regulated enough to allow you to say, if you're coming in as a brand, do you own it? Here's some KYC. We don't necessarily need to own your information, but we need an entity or organization to stand up for you and say that you have the rights to it. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we never brought Banksy onto Virtua, because we never met him. or Murat, we'd love to sell his artwork, but because we don't know who he is, what's to stop someone tomorrow from creating a piece and saying that they're Murat? Because it's anonymous by definition. But it's got to come from the community and be run by the community in a self-governing way, because that's what Gen Zs want. And actually, when something becomes regulated by a company, like look at the people just move from one brand to another. Look at Facebook. You've seen the transition from people from Facebook pages to Instagram, and then movement of groups from one to another and another. And that's driven by the fact people don't like the fact someone's got access to everything. Once it's anonymous, then that's going to make things easier, and then it can be self-governed.
Absolutely, I very much agree with that, and I think it has to be managed in that way. That aside, I think regulation from governments, the protection of consumers is very important, and that, as Jawad touched on there, the AML, the KYC, the protection of consumers purchasing, digital wallets, all of that is being addressed. And I think current times are showing us that if we're to pick up after this downturn in the crypto winter, then the way that's going to happen is by having some regulation in place that protects the consumer. We're beginning to see that, and I think Dubai is leading the way on that, which is fantastic. And also we're talking to lawyers in the UK who are also leading the way on ensuring that consumers have the confidence to come back into the market and invest and be involved in the way that they want to be. So things are heading in the right direction from what I can see.
Yeah, I guess I echo on both fronts there. Ultimately, a form of regulation in industries will apply. So you will see certain industries, like in the financial services sector and others, which will obviously bring in some kind of a governance structure which will help protect the consumer. Ultimately, the community will mandate that through the ecosystem as it builds out. So we've run, for example, at the Capital Club, we've ran policy, law and order workshops, and we brought the whole ecosystem together. And to look at, early stages, what are those key considerations, challenges that you need to consider around potential regulation, but more specifically in terms of, not being as restrictive as what probably people are thinking when it comes to who's going to own a metaverse. Nobody will own a metaverse. It's like the internet. Nobody owns it. But what happens is, you start to build on it. And then those constructs that you start to build in certain environments and whatever you're offering, and let's take the example of, someone trying to copy, certain IP owned by brands A, B, or C. There will be accountability at some point. So, that civil law still applies regardless of where you are. But at the end of the day, the governance and the drive will happen through community initiative plus industry regulation at some point. So that's essentially where it'll end up moving.
Thank you, Carl. Okay, so we actually are still getting some few questions from our audience, but since we have very limited time, we are going to answer you independently, separately after the session. Then we will reach out to you. So thank you so much again, Asif, Jawad, and Carl. Thank you so much for your time today, and for all those audiences who are watching us live today. Thank you so much for your time, and on behalf of Disruptive Focus, have a great day ahead.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.